Hello, I'm Chris Parker with parkerphotographic.com, and this is a deep dive into importing your images into Lightroom Classic. So you're going to learn everything you need to know about getting your images inside of Lightroom, including tips for improving your productivity and speeding up Lightroom based on the selections you make. And then I'm going to share some pro tips for organizing your images. So if you're ready, let's do it. All right, so to begin importing your images, you're going to go up to the library module here and then down here and click on the import button. And then you're going to be presented with this new window with three main columns. So on the left side is the source, and that's where you're going to tell Lightroom to import the images from. The center will be a preview of those files. And then on the right side, you will have some options you can select before you import that can help you streamline your workflow and improve your productivity. So we're going to go over all of these different panels as well as these four options up here, which are going to alter the options you will see visible over here on the right side. So let's go ahead and start with the source and dig a little deeper into the source section, because there's something critical that you need to do before you begin importing your images, and that's creating a folder and file naming structure that you can utilize consistently as you work with Lightroom Classic. Because if you don't have a structure in place and you change a folder and or file name outside of Lightroom, you're going to create problems in Lightroom. Specifically, you're not going to be able to edit or organize your images if you change the name outside of Lightroom. So basically the source is telling Lightroom, okay, my images live exactly in this folder with this name, and these are the file names. So there's a link between that folder and Lightroom. And if that link is broken because you changed the name, you won't be able to do anything in Lightroom until you relink all that information back into Lightroom. So let me give you a couple of options for a folder and file naming structure. So for this catalog here, my landscape and wildlife catalog, I created this a few months ago, and I did a simple naming structure of locations for the folder names. And then inside the folder, I just have a specific number with the name of that location. So a very simple naming structure. Now, I did create a more complex naming structure for my wedding and portrait photography business. So let's take a look at that. So I have my master folder here, and then inside we can see I have three different folders plus my wedding catalog. So I have my portraits folder, my stock photos that I've created, and a weddings folder. Now inside the weddings folder, you're going to see different folders by year. And then inside of that, I have different folders for the name of the client, as well as additional folders inside of that, which are showing the type of file format, in this case, DNG, and then tweaks, which are files that I did some creative edits to. And then I have a specific file naming structure for those. So you have to think about a naming structure you want to use for your workflow. And then you can begin importing your images, knowing that you're not going to have any problems in the future, unless of course you do rename those files or folders, or if you move them to another location or hard drive. All right, so let's go back inside of the import dialog here, and let's take a look at some of the other options. Now on the source side, Lightroom is going to recognize all the hard drives that are connected to your computer. So I have my internal drive up here, plus three external drives that I can use as a source to import files from. Now, if I take my media card here, and if I connect it to my computer, Lightroom is going to automatically detect that new device, and then I can use that as a source to import files. Now, at this time, all those files are grayed out, and that's because these files have already been imported into Lightroom. Now, if we come over here to file handling, there's an option that says don't import suspected duplicates. So if I turn this off, I can import those files again. But I do recommend turning this on so you don't accidentally import duplicate files. Now, if for some reason you're not seeing any images, or if Lightroom says no photos, that's because you need to turn on include subfolders if you're selecting a folder at the top of the hierarchy with one or more subfolders inside. So if I click on this folder here, it's going to say no photos, but when I click on subfolders, it will find all the files in each of those subfolders. All right, so let's take a look at these 4 options up here, and the one you choose will be dependent on what works best for you and your workflow. Now, the first option here is copy as DNG. So what's going to happen is Lightroom is going to take the files inside of this folder, and it's going to create a DNG file of each of the original raw files and import only the DNG file. So we need to tell Lightroom the destination where that DNG file should be created. And we need to click on destination here to select where Lightroom should copy those DNG files to. Now, if you're not familiar with DNG files, they are a file format that is different from the original raw file, and they have advantages and disadvantages. So if you want to learn a little bit more about that, let me know in the comments below. So the destination panel here has a few different options. So let's go over those. So the first option is to place them into a custom folder with a name of your choice. And you have some options to organize by folders or by date. So if you choose by original folders, that's going to keep the same file structure that your original raw files are in. But if you choose by date, that's going to separate all the files into individual folders by date. So we can see we have 2022 here. There's 32 images and a bunch of different folders that are going to be created for each one of those files. Now, next to the folders here, we can see the number of images in each folder. And then down here at the bottom, we have 2023 with, looks like 2 folders for that particular folder. Now, if you want to change the date format for the naming of those folders, just come in here and click here, and then you can select a different format from here. Now, if you're not going to create a DNG file, you can copy the files from your source and place them into another destination. And those files that are copied will be imported into Lightroom. So the source could be an external hard drive, and then the destination could be your internal hard drive. Now, the move option would just be taking the images from your external and moving them based on your destination, and those files in that new location will be imported. Now, my preferred method is add, and that's because based on my workflow, what works best for me is to take the images off the media card and place them directly on my internal hard drive in the location before I get into Lightroom. And then once I get into Lightroom, all I have to do is click on add and locate those files via the source. And then because I have add selected, 2 of those other options that we had before are no longer visible because we don't need to move or copy them based on this particular workflow. So let's take a look at these other 2 options here to get an idea of how this can improve your experience with Lightroom and make it more productive. Now, the other thing I want to mention real quick is these other 3 options do include the file renaming panel here that we haven't talked about yet. So if you want to import and rename your files during the import process, you can do that from here, but it's not something that I do or recommend. What I like to do is I like to go through and find the keepers and the images that should never see the light of day, and I'll reject those, and then I will delete them from my computer, and anything that is a keeper, I will then rename accordingly. All right, let's start with the file handling options here, and there's quite a few to go over. So let's go over the building of previews first, and the options for building previews can speed up reviewing your images in the library module and others. So there are 4 main types of previews that you can build during import. And remember, you're not importing the original raw file as we talked about in the previous tutorial. Instead, you're seeing a preview of the original, but we need to let Lightroom know what size of preview to create, and each has its advantages and disadvantages. So the minimal preview is the smallest and fastest preview for Lightroom to create. So this means your images will be imported faster compared to the other options. However, keep in mind that the quality of these previews is not that good and will be best for viewing your images in the grid view. So if you want to review your images in loop view or zoom in, Lightroom will need to create a higher quality preview before you can view the fine details of your image. So let me show you what that looks like real quick. So I'm gonna go in here, and this folder of images had minimal previews created during import. And if I click on this image and zoom in, you're going to notice that the image is pixelated. And before we can see the fine details, it takes a few seconds to do that. And sometimes you will see this loading bar down here at the bottom. And depending on the speed of your computer and the size of your files, this could take a couple of seconds to a few seconds or longer. So if that's something that you don't want to have happen, then you'll want to choose a higher quality preview. So the next option here, let's get back into the import dialog window here. So the next option is the embedded and sidecar previews. And this is going to tell Lightroom Classic to use the JPEG preview built into the raw file if it exists. So if you want to import your images the fastest way possible that gives you a preview that's good enough to view in the library module, then go ahead and select this. All right, so next we have standard previews that will let you view photos in the loop view since they're of a higher quality, but they are not large enough for you to zoom into. So again, like minimal, Lightroom will need to create higher quality previews. Now, the best quality previews are 1:1, but they also take the longest to build, and it's going to take much longer for your images to import. Plus, the files are very large compared to the other three, and it's going to take up a lot of hard drive space. Now, the benefit of these is not having to wait for Lightroom to load the new preview since it's already been created during import. So it's going to be a lot faster to zoom into those types of previews. Okay, so the next type of preview is called a smart preview. And these allow you to work with your images in Lightroom Classic when the original raw files are missing. So remember earlier, I mentioned that Lightroom needs a link to the original raw files. And if you rename anything, that link is broken. You can also break that link if your raw files are on an external hard drive and you disconnect it. So let's say you're editing on a laptop and you go on vacation, but you forget your external hard drive. Well, if you have images on that drive and you wanted to work on them while traveling, well, you can't since the link is broken. However, if you create smart previews, Lightroom won't need that link to the external drive to be connected. So this means you'll be able to edit those files even though the link is broken. All right, so we've already talked about this option here, and make a second copy to is available when you select one of these other three options up here, and that will basically allow you to create another copy if you want to back up your files that way. And then add to collection is another way of organizing your images into virtual folders, and we'll talk more about that when we get into organizing your images. All right, so the next panel here, we have apply during import. And now these options are pretty cool. So we have develop settings here. And if you click on that, you're going to see a list of all your developed presets. And what you can do here is, let's say you have a specific preset that you like to add to all your images, or maybe a lot of images, maybe not all of them. Well, you can select that preset from here and it will be applied during import. That's pretty awesome if you ask me. Now, I like to do this for lens correction, so I can fix lens distortion and chromatic aberrations during the import process. So that's one less thing I have to worry about doing during the editing process. Now, under that, we have a metadata preset, and I have one here called Parker Photographic, and this is my copyright preset. So if I edit that, let's take a look at that, and I need to select it from up here. And if we scroll down, we can see my copyright information. So all that information is going to be included in the metadata of the files that are imported. And if you want to create one, just click on New, give it a name up here, and then scroll down and include the information here that is in red. And then under that, we have a keywords box that will allow you to put in keywords to begin organizing your images. But I would recommend keeping those keywords to be more generic versus specific. So for this, I would do like location, season, or if I'm shooting one individual, I may put their name in there if I have multiple types of subjects like I do in this folder here, I wouldn't want to put a monarch butterfly because that only applies to that one specific file here. And that keyword will then be applied to all of them. So I would do the more specific keywords in the library module once they're imported inside. All right, so the last thing I want to show you is this option down here. It says import preset. So what you can do is you can take all these settings that you selected and you can save it as a new preset, which would be helpful to you if you have multiple workflows. Let's say sometimes you want to create a DNG file, but other times you may not. Sometimes you may want to copy or move. Sometimes you may want minimal to get through the images faster to approve and reject images, or you may want to just start off with high quality images depending on the photo shoot. And instead of coming back in here and making all these selections and also different developed presets and different metadata presets, you can save them as a preset, and then Lightroom will quickly update all the different settings based on that preset. All right, so once you have all your selections, you can begin importing. You're going to see this progress bar up here showing the progress of those previews being built. It could take a few seconds, a few minutes, or more depending on the speed of your computer. Now that all your images are in Lightroom, you now need to organize your images. But how do you do that? Well, check out this video tutorial next to learn how to organize your images in Lightroom Classic.